Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of the Canadians in the frugal riding of Renfrew Nipissing Pembroke. Recently, I asked the NDP Liberal coalition if they would adopt a dollar-for-dollar rule for this week's budget. It's a common-sense rule where a government finds $1 in savings for every new dollar of spending. It allows government to focus resources where it's most needed without stalking inflation. The response from the President of the Treasury Board was embarrassing. More than embarrassing, it was sad and pathetic. Her response was the parliamentary equivalent of the classic schoolyard taunt, "I know you are, but what am I?" There's something about this so-called feminist prime minister's government which takes smart, accomplished, professional women in the private sector and turns them into shallow, glib, bobblehead dolls in Parliament. If they're lucky, like Jane and Jody, they get out before the prime minister demands they shred their integrity. If they're unlucky, they work hard in a given portfolio only to be demoted when they start getting better press than the prime minister. I imagine that's why the president of the Treasury Board decided to ignore a policy question and reply with a lazy partisan attack. She needs to get back into the good graces of the inner circle. Any display of independent thought by any minister in this government risks bringing down the wrath of Katie. But falling in line and following orders is something the minister is especially skilled at. How else can we explain that someone could serve as defense minister, receive firsthand a look at the dire state of the military readiness, then go on to cut billions from defense budget? That's right, Madam Speaker. The president of the Treasury Board is leading a program review. They're cutting spending from national security priorities so they can increase spending on Liberal reelection priorities. It's not quite a dollar-for-dollar policy. It's more a borrowed $10 for a dollar policy, or more accurately, a borrowed $1 trillion. They've borrowed so much money that the cost to finance their mountain of debt is more than what we spend on health care. The interest payments are more than all the tax collected through the GST. Incredibly, as if to fulfill the prophecy of Oedipus Rex, this Prime Minister has done in 9 years what it took his father 16 years to accomplish. Pierre Trudeau left Canada in such an economic hole it took another 16 years to dig us out. Because this government's historic levels of secrecy, utter lack of transparency, and deceptive bookkeeping, Canadians don't know how deep this hole is. That's because more and more it appears as if this socialist coalition has adopted a kamikaze strategy. They know Canadians want to change. They know Canadians are tired of this corrupt, arrogant, preachy, self-righteous prime minister. They know no amount of new spending is going to improve their poll numbers. They know this, yet their strategy is damn the torpedoes and full speed ahead. The Socialist coalition started us on a slow run to insolvency, but now they're in a full sprint. This reckless spending is not achieving positive results. The more they spend, the less Canadians can afford. Madam Speaker, before the parliamentary secretary rises to read Katie Telford's latest talking points, I just want to remind them the question I asked was not a partisan question, but a straightforward policy one. All the experts Liberals love to quote said, more spending fuels inflation. So I ask again, will this government cap spending with a dollar-for-dollar rule to bring down inflation? Madam Speaker, this government's gaslighting is endless. If they were forced to pay the carbon tax on all that hot air, we could pay off their $2 trillion debt tomorrow. As these far-left radicals grow even more desperate, Canadians can expect a biblical-sized flood of misinformation and disinformation. Their favorite tactic will be the classic accusation in the mirror. They accuse everyone else of doing exactly the thing that they are doing. They'll shamelessly claim all we have are slogans. This from the party who's so infatuated with round numbers. Every environmental policy has the same 30 by 30 slogan. They said they'd reduce emissions 30% by 2030. They said they'd render 30% of Canada's land and seas unusable by 2030. Their Soviet-style car sales mandate goes even further, forcing 50% EVs by 2030. After 9 years, all they have are empty slogans, broken promises, and a mountain of debt. This Prime Minister and his Socialist coalition are just not worth the cost.